Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. Imagine strolling down a busy street or entering a building only to suddenly find yourself transported to an event that happened in the past. Reports of these unusual visions are many, but are they real or simply tricks of the imagination? The following are three more fascinating time-slip stories. Letham, Scotland. On January 2nd, 1950, Elizabeth Smith had attended a cocktail party in a town 10 miles from the village of Letham, which is a small village in Angus, in northeast Scotland, coming from another small village in Angus called Dunnican Hill, where Elizabeth Smith lived. It was a distance of just over 2 miles. Elizabeth and her small dog left the party quite late and had only driven a short distance when it started to snow, which quickly turned into rain. As there were no lights, signs or any other markings on the road, Elizabeth quickly became disoriented before driving into a ditch. Fortunately, she was not injured in any way in the minor accident and soon realised that she would have to finish her journey on foot along with her small dog. Although the journey by car would have been very quick, on foot it would obviously have taken her a lot longer. Elizabeth then had to traverse dark country roads where farms were few and far between in the dark and desolate countryside. Because of the rainy weather and bleak surroundings, Elizabeth found the journey on foot quite difficult and avoided taking any shortcuts, as that would have taken her through dark woods, which would have made her extremely nervous. Also, for most of her journey, she was forced to carry her dog. As Elizabeth was approaching the village of Letham, she started to come across signs of civilization, where she came across some houses that were on the outskirts of the village. She continued to walk, and as she was coming close to her own village of Dunnican Hill, she started to see groups of lights in the far distance that had suddenly caught her eye. Slowly, the lights got closer and closer, and she was able to get a clearer view of them. She could see that there were people carrying flaming torches, and then, as she looked to her right, there appeared a second group of people who were further back. But then a third group of people appeared who were much closer and about 50 yards away. This group was heading towards some farm buildings. At this stage, her small dog was now perched on her shoulder and began to growl at the third group with their flaming torches who were heading to the farmhouse. Elizabeth Smith could see that the third group were inspecting dead bodies on the ground and were turning them over to see whether they were one of their own. If they did not recognise the body, it was immediately placed back with its head face down. Elizabeth then noticed the strange clothing on the people that was dark and brown. They were wearing tights on their legs and a tunic-style dress with a roll at the bottom edge. Although she was not able to describe what they were wearing on their feet, she was certain that they were not wearing long boots of any kind. Elizabeth was also able to describe their flame torches that were red. In later studies of Elizabeth Smith's detailed description, they found that the red flame torches were the resinous roots of the Scotch fir that were used for torch flames, and the colour of these roots was red and probably looked more of a vivid red due to the bright flame. She also noticed that the figures appeared to walk around the edges of the field, and studies showed that there had once been a small loch or stream there, but this had drained away centuries before. It appears that Elizabeth Smith had somehow come across Pictish warriors from the year 650 AD, and battles between the Picts and the Northumbrians happened regularly in that area. It seems that Elizabeth Smith had entered into a time slip and was seeing the aftermath of one of their many battles. East London, England. The following story took place around the 1950s in a place called Toynbee Hall on Commercial Street in East London. It was not the first time that Vera Conway had experienced a paranormal event in her life, and on one particular occasion she experienced what could only have been described as a time slip. Vera was to attend a piano lesson at Toynbee Hall. It was an evening class, and because she had never been there before, she had difficulty in finding the room. She then went back down the stairs to reception to inquire what room the lesson was taking place in. She was told to go upstairs to the first floor, where her class was at the end of the corridor. Vera went back upstairs to the first floor and heard a violin playing in one of the rooms and someone singing in another room. She walked to the end of the corridor and found a ladies' and men's toilet, and in between the toilets was a door. Vera decided to open the door, hoping it would be the correct room. As she opened the door, she came upon an amazing sight and moved closer into the room, closing the door behind her, but still holding onto the door handle. Vera now found herself in a theatre, but there were no electric lights, just glowing yellow lanterns. It looked to be something from the Regency period, from the 17th or 18th century. Suddenly the curtains on the stage closed. Then a man came walking towards her, wearing breeches and with powdered hair. The audience started to move about and everyone started talking. Then two women walked past her wearing tight-waisted dresses that were extremely old-fashioned, and they were talking to one another. She wanted to ask them if they knew where her classes were, but was too frightened. She realised that something was not quite right with the unusual scene in front of her. Although she was wearing her normal clothes, she came to the conclusion that she had somehow witnessed an event from an earlier period in the building, but was not actually part of it, as her modern clothing had not attracted the attention of the people around her, especially the two women walking past her. Was she invisible to them? But what if she had spoken to them? At a later date, when Vera was visiting the hall, she came upon the two toilets, but this time there was no door in between them. Did that door temporarily open up into another period of time, and did Vera enter into another dimension, or was it a time slip? Highlands, Scotland. Sometime in the 1960s, a woman by the name of Susanna Stone was driving a friend from Tain to east of Ross in the Highlands of Scotland. They suddenly saw a building on fire near Roskane Free Church and drove to the area to see if they could assist in any way, but suddenly lost sight of the fire. They both assumed that the fire was hidden behind bushes and fences. As they rounded a bend, they could see no sign of the fire. After Susanna dropped off her friend, she returned to the location where they had seen the fire, but there was no sign of a fire ever having been there, and what was even more confusing was that there was no sign of the house that was on fire. Confused, she went to the fire brigade, who told her that they had only attended a small fire the previous night, but it was nowhere near the location she had described. This event continued to baffle Susanna, and a few years later she returned to the location of the phantom fire and found the remnants of stonework and an old driveway that suggested there had once been a building on the site. After speaking to a few locals, she came across a couple who had also experienced seeing the burning building. 35 years after the incident, the scene of the fire was still fresh in her memory, and suddenly she realised something very unusual about the event. At the time, she had heard no noise and also seen no smoke, nor people or firemen. Even though she had lived in the area for many years, she had never seen that house before. What happened to Susanna Stone appears to describe a classic time slip where people would often experience a deathly silence with no people.